Hi, this is Ira Bryck, and I welcome you to the Western Mass Business Show, where every week I talk with people mostly who are from Western Mass. Occasionally I reach out further, like Eastern Mass. Um, Today I have two guests that have both been on the show before, but here we are all together with a new topic. My guests are Meghan Rothschild, that has a company that you'll hear more about if you don't know all about it already, Chick Media, and Dylan Pilon of Cloud9 Marketing Group, both to have you here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, good to be back. Thanks, Ira.
And I had not asked you and realized this morning that I don't even know if you know each other. And you were telling me that just recently you actually did a project together for the first time.
Yeah, I know that Dylan and I had at least heard each other's names, and then we finally actually got to collaborate on something. So it was awesome to finally get to merge our skill sets together.
Yeah, the small sandbox that is Western Massachusetts marketing. It's about time. Yeah.
Yeah. And in that sandbox, it does seem like there's quite a few people playing. So it's impressive.
Yeah.
So that's my first question is, I never realized, even when I had a store and did advertising on the radio and in print, it was pre-social media, but there's kind of a spectrum from advertising to marketing to branding. And just where are you on that spectrum? I don't think anybody occupies one point, but can you each just talk about, let's say Meghan first and then Dylan, where you are on that spectrum of advertising, marketing, branding, et cetera?
Yeah, so we as an agency consider ourselves full service, and we feel it's more of a linear experience. So the branding really comes first, and then the marketing and advertising are sort of, advertising is a part of marketing.
Uh-huh.
So we urge our clients to really start at the beginning and have a good set of branding guidelines, Pantone colors that they want to use, fonts that they like, things that look consistent across all of their digital platforms and print platforms if they happen to have that as well. And then from there, once that's in order, I always say you wouldn't have a party and invite everyone over if your house was a mess. So we try to
Uh-huh.
get everyone's house really clean and looking great, and then we start inviting people in.
Right.
That's where it moves to the marketing strategy and the advertising pieces that we're going to include within that strategy.
Uh-huh. So it's the advertising and the marketing is like driven by the branding decisions.
I mean, I would say so, yes. I think that in order to be effective in anything you're going to do from a marketing perspective, you have to have a strong brand, because the key with marketing is to be known before you're needed, but also to be easily recognizable without people having to constantly see your company's name. So we
Mm-hmm.
know McDonald's because they've got the golden arches, and
Right.
that's, we know that their colors are yellow and red, and that's just been their brand from day one. So we're always constantly working with small business owners who may have started their business and be a few years in, but then all of a sudden are looking to expand and don't really have that consistent look and feel. So sometimes we have to take a couple steps back in order for the marketing to really be highly effective.
Right. Okay. And so Dylan, what do you say to build on that?
Yeah, I mean, our focus at Cloud9 Marketing Group is really the digital and social media aspect. So we're sort of the masters in the distribution. We have fantastic strategic partners within this local community, so we can also act as a full service agency, although we don't necessarily tout it that way. We're very transparent in who we work with and who we bring to the table.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, our clients know that our specialty is really in the targeting and the distribution of the creative. And whether that's going out on your social profiles, content like blog content on your website, email marketing, and then managing all of those communities for you by replying to the comments, messages, and reviews that are coming in as close to real time as possible. Google AdWords is another specialty that we have. So those are sort of the things that we try to key in on when we're talking to people. We always end up doing sort of business consulting or branding work because it's just part of the workflow, as Meghan had articulated earlier. So it's hard not to be involved in all aspects of it. But I think when you boil it down to the fundamentals, there's the branding side of marketing, and then there's the sales side of marketing. And you can't have one without the other. And depending on who you talk to, they might say that one's more important than the other. But I actually agree with Meghan that I think in the long term, I think brand matters more than sales. If you have a consistent, sustainable brand that's easily identified by the marketplace, then you can win the long game, which is what we're all trying to do.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we're going to be touching back on what you do and your thoughts about all of that. But we did say that our subject for today was going to be about humor. And I'm a big fan of funny commercials. I'm a terrible enemy of bad puns. I love good puns. I hate bad puns. So, um, and there's so many funny commercials that I watch that I'm saying that was really clever. I don't know what the product was, but so just let's start with your opening statement. Let's have Dylan go first this time on like, what do you think is the importance of humor in advertising? Does it help the message go in somehow better, or are you just appealing to people that like to laugh, or what?
Yeah, so I think this day and age, consumers, they can smell a sales pitch from a mile away, right? We are bombarded by, I would probably thousands of messages a day, whether we even consciously realize it or not. And social media has only really amplified this. Um, so a great way to get a consumer to sort of let their guard down is with the creative. So if you can, and it doesn't necessarily have to be humor, it could be any emotion, right? You could elicit sadness or joy or anger, or you could inspire them. But that creative needs to capture their attention, and you only have 3 to 5 seconds maybe at the beginning of a piece of content to really get the attention of the person who's watching it. And I think humor specifically is a great tool to do that, because I don't know anybody who doesn't enjoy a good laugh, right? So I think if it makes sense for your brand, and later in this conversation, I have an example where it backfired, but
Mhm.
if your brand can align well with humor, or you can do it tastefully in a way that will properly resonate with your core audience, I think it's an excellent tool.
Okay. So, Megan, answer that question, but I just want to throw on top of that. Not everybody has the same sense of humor. So, how do you broadcast something to a lot of people and that it's going to be funny to people that like sick jokes or weird jokes?
Well, I don't know if I'd ever recommend sick jokes as part of a marketing strategy, but yeah, I mean, to Dylan's point, right now we're in a world where people do not have tremendously long attention spans. So if you can catch them quickly, but it's always best. But the other part of that is if there's viral ability to it, right? So if people are sharing it constantly, even if it takes a couple seconds to get in, if you've seen that it's had 1 million shares or 1 million views or likes, people want to see what that's about. They want to see what's funny. They want to see the catch. So I think utilizing humor is, it can be a really scary thing for a lot of companies. Dylan mentioned how, you have to make sure it aligns with your brand. And I think you could probably find a way to make it align with most brands, but I think that's a really fine line to walk. And I also think it's scary for business owners to make the leap. And I have an example of that as well. But in terms of resonating with sort of a mass audience, that's a tough question, because you're right. There's some people who are going to think something's hilarious and others don't. I remember sending a video to my sisters and my mom. We have a group chat, and I was in tears laughing at it. And my mother goes, "I don't think this is funny at all." And I'm like, "What?" And my sisters are like, "Come on, mom, it's hysterical." So I don't know if that was a generation issue, but I think it's really important before you make the leap and you decide that you're going to use humor in a marketing campaign, you identify who the audience is that you're trying to target. Is it people in their 20s? Is it people in their 50s and 60s? Because those groups might have a different idea of what's funny. And you have to do a little bit of market research. I'm a big fan of focus groups. Do you think this is funny? Does this script, resonate? Does this seem like something that's going to resonate with you and be memorable? Because that's another key, is if something makes you laugh and makes you feel happy, you're going to remember it. So I think the important part is always really knowing who your audience is and finding a way to communicate effectively to them through utilizing humor.
Right. I know when I see a commercial that I think is particularly clever, I give extra points to the product that it doesn't deserve. I don't think this Swiffer is going to work better because they had a good advertising agency. But what do you think of, like, do people give extra credit to funny commercials, Dylan?
Um, I think that it goes back to their impression of the brand overall, right? So if a brand does a great job of communicating with consumers and they consistently deliver commercials or advertising spots that the consumers enjoy, you certainly are going to have their attention. And that's a big, I mean, that's what everybody is vying for with marketing and advertising, is you want the lowest cost, highest converting attention that you can get. So if you have a brand, a strong brand, and you can come up with some sort of, like, for me, the one that always has resonated with me, even since I was a child, and I think I've talked about it on the show before, but it's the MasterCard.
Mhm.
You know, like a Fenway Frank costs $10, a ticket to the Red Sox game costs $30, but the memories that you're going to have with your son forever are priceless, right? If you have a campaign or something like that, that you can build off all these different scenarios with that one theme that pulls through, I think that's a huge asset for a brand. And does it make MasterCard a better credit card than a Visa? Probably not, but it might be better top mind awareness, and it might be the first one that the consumer thinks of when they think about a credit card.
And if you think of a brand as a promise to the consumer, I mean, the message that I get from Priceless is this is for a higher class of credit card user. Like, you appreciate the finer things in life or the deeper experiences in life, and so you'll appreciate that. This is not just for buying hot dogs, right?
Yeah, there might be some pull through on that end, that there's more to it than just swiping your card to make a purchase, right? It's that these purchases that you're making with our product, our credit card, are actually memories that you're going to have for the rest of your life. So it sort of repositions their product from, we're just another credit card, to, we're the experiential credit card.
Mm.
So
Yeah,
the
and
message, yeah, Megan.
I was just gonna say, I would add on to that, that I think that's a major shift that you're seeing over the last few years, particularly recently with brands, is that people, this whole concept of content marketing and aligning yourself with a lifestyle, right? So people don't buy shoes anymore because, there was a commercial. They buy shoes because it's part of a fitness lifestyle, or someone influential is recommending and endorsing the brand, and it's a lifestyle they want to emulate. And so, to Dylan's point about, the being priceless memories with your son, that's what's resonating more with people, this authentic sort of lifestyle vibe, as opposed to buy this, use this. That doesn't work so effectively anymore.
So when you meet a client and you're discovering what their needs are and what their brand is and all of that, um, how do you know when it's appropriate to use humor, even from just the personality of the person, whether they are going to be the Tom Carvel kind of human mascot or not? Like, this person should not have a funny commercial because they are not at all funny. Either of you.
Yeah, so I think it does have a lot to do with the client's personality right away, particularly for, when we work with small to medium sized businesses who are going to utilize a person in their commercial, or it's going to be, there's sort of like a one person show, and the brand is them. You can tell right away if someone's not going to be comfortable doing something in front of the camera, not going to be comfortable with any type of humor message. They have a more serious tone. I remember years ago, we had a financial investment firm that we were working with, and I think they had the potential to do something really fun. And I storyboarded 3 concepts for a theme, to Dylan's point, having this sort of consistent theme throughout. I wanted to produce 3 commercials about the impact of financial planning and why you need to do it early, and what are the milestones in life that you have to plan for. And they rejected it right away. They were just like, no, we don't, we're not interested in that. And it wasn't because they weren't necessarily interested in humor. It had to do with the idea of producing a commercial and how labor intensive and costly that was going to be. We ended up seeing a really similar concept to what, I don't know if you guys remember the commercial where, I don't remember the brand. So this is to one of your points, Ira, about remembering the commercial, but not the brand. It was a doctor who had just come back from like being on medical leave, or he had left, and he comes in, he's like, what are we doing today? We're taking a kidney? Yeah, we'll figure it out. And he kind of walks out, and the husband and wife are looking at each other like, is this doctor competent enough to perform the surgery? And it was really similar to the idea that we had storyboarded for this investment firm. And I was like, we could have been out there with this concept on a local basis and really impressed people, but
Right.
they just weren't into the idea of using humor for their
Right.
messaging.
And I don't remember the product either, but I do remember knowing that it was an analogy of, like, you wouldn't hire a doctor like this, so would you buy these shoes?
Right.
So-
Yeah, exactly. And that was our concept. It was like, you wouldn't not plan for your student to arrive at college, why wouldn't you plan for their college education financially? Like, it was drawing a comparison between, you wouldn't, prepare, you would prepare for all of these things. Why aren't you preparing for retirement? Why aren't you preparing for the financial milestones in your life? So yeah, I was a little disappointed that we didn't get a chance to actually execute that concept, but maybe someday.
So let me ask Dylan, and you can answer too, Megan, so I always say the brand is the promise, right? And then I've had people say to me, but it's not what you, the business owner, is promising. It's the promise that your consumer wants of you. The brand is almost more accurately defined by what your customer says it is. So how does that enter into this whole picture for you? And then what message, funny or not, would you deliver to say, this is what you, customer, want?
Yeah. So like perception is reality, right? So it's one of those things where when we're going through the onboarding process with a new client, we want them to tell us what they think their brand is before we go out and figure out, like Megan mentioned, focus groups and things like that, doing surveys, things like that, what the market thinks their brand is. And is there any overlap? And if there is, that's great. That's where you want to be, right? That's a brand that's aware of how they're actually positioned in the market versus what they just think is going on, right? Trying to tie humor into that, there's some industries and there's some brands where it probably just doesn't make sense, right? Not a good idea. Or sometimes it's all in the approach, right? So the case that I referenced earlier was actually Kraft macaroni and cheese. They had a campaign that I think it was only out for about a day before they had to pull the whole thing. So they invested all this money to do this big push of send nudes. That was like the,
oh no.
And with a different brand. So send nudes. So for those listening, that's like a pornographic photo that you might send to somebody who you are physically involved with, right? And obviously their spin was Kraft macaroni and cheese is a noodle, right? So they came up with this campaign, and you could actually, in theory, it was a good idea. You can actually send boxes of macaroni and cheese to your loved ones through this landing page that they had developed on the internet. And it was a good idea. And they actually moved a lot of units through the website. So from an executional standpoint, I guess you could say that the campaign was a success, but there was such massive pushback from people, the mothers who purchased Kraft macaroni and cheese for their child, that the campaign was only live for less than 48 hours before Kraft removed every trace of it off the web.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if that was ramen noodle who decided to use that ploy, where they're college kids who are broke, and that send nudes would really resonate with that culture and would be less likely to offend anybody, that could have been a Super Bowl level home run advertising campaign. But because the brand Kraft mac and cheese is associated with children, and the people who buy it are the mothers of these children, that humor totally missed the mark, like we talked about earlier. And if it had been a brand where it made more sense, like a ramen noodle consumed by more college students, could have been a home run.
Right. And I was just thinking, I don't even think this was a commercial. I think it was just a clip of this woman that was getting ready to go work for voter registration or something like that. And she was like, I got my Dunkies, like Dunkin' Donuts. I got my Dunkies and I'm going to go out. And I thought, like, it's such an in joke that somebody would know that you really have to be a fan of Dunkin' Donuts. I got my Dunkies. But even Dunkin' Donuts changing their name to Dunkin' is like, you're part of a club that is so devoted to this brand that you have a well-known nickname for the brand, but it becomes a funny thing. So I guess my question to you, Megan, is like, how much does an ad through humor or not humor ever appeal to you're one of the group of people that love this thing, you're part of this party?
Yeah, I think that's a big selling point. Dunkin' changed their name because, and their whole statement about why they did it was because we're on a first name basis with our customers, right? So it's that community, that sense of inclusion. I'm a part of something. It's almost tribal, like it's just, you want to be part of the crowd. You want to be part of the group. That's why they have perks programs, and we see all these companies putting out loyalty and membership programs because people want to be a part of something. One of the most successful local businesses that I see is a koozie company, Love Mishko. I don't know if you've heard of them, but she's from Westfield, and she releases 5 new patterns of this koozie once a month for 5 minutes, and she sells out. She
Just
sells
what is a
thousands.
koozie? Is like a thing that warms
Yeah, I
coffee.
wish I had one with me. I usually
Yeah.
have one around a coffee or something. Yeah,
Yeah.
it keeps it whatever
Keeps coffee
temperature
hot.
it's supposed to be. It can
Yeah.
go on an iced coffee, it can go on a hot coffee, it can go
Right.
on whatever. There's different sizes, but the purpose of this story is that she literally has created this culture, this community that's like, I've got to get my Love Mishko, and I've got to be on, like, you have to refresh the website over and over again until the store opens, and then you better dive in, you better know exactly what you want because it's selling out in 5 minutes. And that just blows my mind, but she's capitalized on that sense of first name basis, I'm part of a group, and that translates so effectively and so well to social media, right? Because we're all documenting, for better or worse, we're documenting every darn thing that we do every day. You know, I'm getting up, I'm going to the gym, I'm taking a picture of it. I'm getting up, I'm running to a meeting, I'm taking a picture of it. So if I get my Love Mishko in, I'm taking a picture of it and putting it up on social media.
Right.
So I think that really plays into that, you know, whether it's humor or another emotion that we use, that sense of like, I'm a part of something bigger, it really resonates and works well right now for marketing.
Yeah. So Dylan, you must collaborate with, if you're on social media, you need to collaborate with people that are doing print and, you know, whatever else. And so how do you align with them? Like, you have an idea for social media, but you need to actually make that whole thing, you know, kind of like a seamless story.
Yeah, so the first thing I think is not drawing a line in the sand between digital and the rest of the more, you know, traditional marketing methods. So, you know, as I've referenced earlier, we have great strategic partners within our communities that execute all of these sorts of things, whether it's radio or print or billboard, television, sort of those more traditional methods of marketing that you would think about that don't necessarily have a direct correlation to the internet. And then it goes back to how strong is their brand and how communicable is it across all these different channels. So the way that your logo is presented on your website or on your Facebook page should be the same as your logo is presented on a flyer, a brochure, or a business card, or on a television screen or on a billboard. So a lot of those, you know, most established companies already have those brand assets in place. They have their logo, they know their font, they know their color scheme. They know that when you're doing the logo with the name, the logo without the name, all of these different iterations of and styles of how you can represent a brand. A lot of that stuff is already set in place for most businesses, unless you're a brand new startup, right? And then we can, of course, advise on that. But you know, we hope that the client has all the appropriate files. Sometimes, I'm sure Meghan deals with this, but sometimes it can be a struggle to say, no, I need the PNG version that doesn't have a background on it because I can't have this giant white block because it's not going to look good when we try to put that on something. So a lot of times, you know, we have to go back and forth with, well, who designed it? Okay, can I have their contact information? Let me get the files that I need right from the designer, and then we can work with them and implement them across.
Okay. So let's say that you come up with a campaign that works on video. Your ad on social media might be like a 1 minute funny thing. And I've heard commercials that like they take a minute to make their point. And then once they've made their point a zillion times, then they can pay for a 15-second commercial that just gets to the punchline quickly, and it's cheaper and they get the message. But then you might have to translate it, you know, to print where the joke's not going to translate as well. So that must be an interesting thing to translate humor from one format to another.
Yeah, I mean, we don't deal a whole lot with that particular scenario. If we did, it would be looking at pulling out an identifiable figure or scene from the commercial. So if they take that full minute piece and, like you said, they might cut it down to a 15-second spot so they can run more of them for less money. In that 15-second spot, there's likely to be a key moment that communicates the message.
Mm-hmm.
So my advice would be to capture that moment in a still frame, and then we could try to use that to print and then use whatever copy we have at our disposal to articulate that, execute a call to action to try to get conversion.
And maybe when making the video, even having in mind, we need the still for the print version. Meghan, do you run into things like that?
Yeah, we do a lot of this because we just finished a campaign that actually was over a year in the works, where the primary goal of it was to produce this awesome video that did utilize humor, but utilized you know, some other emotions as well. So we planned in advance to focus heavily on the video, but then we also brought a photographer to the day of the film shoot to make sure we were able to get some stills. We translated the video script so that it made sense for radio, which we lost the humor component when we moved it from video to radio because you just couldn't do it. It was very visual heavy. But we tried to come up with some consistent copy points throughout each of those pieces so that the message at least is the same and the humor might just have to only take place in one of those avenues.
But still, they'd remember the humor.
Exactly.
So, okay, so this is the Western Mass Business Show. If you are not used to our hour-long format, you might realize that the show's not over yet. Please stay tuned through our few commercials and come back for part 2 of hearing Dylan Pilon and Meghan Rothschild talking about all things advertising with an accent on how funny might work for you. And we're back. This is Ira Bryck on the Western Mass Business Show in our longer format. So we really get a chance to deep dive a little bit more. I'm here with Meghan Rothschild from the Western Mass full marketing agency Chick Media, and Dylan Pilon from Cloud9 Marketing Group. We're talking about humor in advertising, and I'm just wondering if each of you could share, starting with Meghan, just another example of a commercial that you think used humor effectively.
Yeah, so I personally love the commercial that we did a few years back for an organization called Impact Melanoma. So melanoma being the deadliest form of skin cancer, something I have a personal connection to. We were really struggling with communicating to a younger audience. So we know melanoma affects people in their 20s quite a lot. Second most common form of cancer for the age group 16 to 22. So we know that there's a great deal of people who are experiencing melanoma in that age group, and all of our messaging was really sort of targeted at men over 50 because they're in the highest mortality rate. So we developed an idea to we call it the annoying mole PSA. And we dressed someone up as an annoying mole who followed a young woman around her house, annoying her. And at the end of it, because that was one of the common things that we heard from people is, oh, I have this annoying mole, or I have this mole that's been bothering me, right? So that was like the common thread when we would talk to young people, is they were always worried about something on their body that had been annoying them. So this mole, this life-size mole, is following this woman around her house, and he's stealing her milk. So she can't use any in her cereal, and he's interrupting her date that she's cooked dinner for, and he's waking her up. He's laying in bed with her when her alarm goes off, and so there's scenes. And at the end of it, it says, "Annoying mole been bothering you? It's time to get it checked. May is Melanoma Awareness Month. Head to mfne.org for more information." And that did so well. It was so polarizing, right? So our executive director, who was in her 60s, hated it. She hated it. She didn't want it played. She was like, bury that thing. But it went on to win 2 Telly Awards. It was extremely popular among that age group. People were sharing it. You know, it hit like 500,000 views within the first month of it going online. And so it was wildly successful for the teens, 20s, and 30s. But sort of 50 plus was really disgusted by the whole thing because he was gross, right? He was a gross mole. So that was one of those examples where, you know, I kept saying to her, I understand you hate it, but you're not the audience. Like, you're not the intended audience for that. And I think it's hard for business owners sometimes to step away and say, is this communicating to the audience I'm trying to reach, as opposed to, does it resonate with me? Am I the audience?
Right.
But I think it worked. It was effective. And as much as she doesn't want to admit it, it worked for the age group that we were trying to target.
And what I'm thinking is, I know that you are a, major spokesperson for that cause from your personal experience. It's really, really serious. And for somebody with that mole, they're probably petrified from it. And here you're kind of normalizing something that is very secret.
Absolutely. And we're also making it, like you said, it was starting a conversation where, oh my God, did you see this ridiculous PSA? I actually have a mole that I need to get checked. It was becoming something that people could talk about, because the skin is not, not to dive too deep down a rabbit hole, but the skin is not something that people in their 20s really care about or pay attention to. And so it sparked this conversation of, wow, I actually really do need to call my dermatologist, or I need to establish care and start getting my skin checked. So it worked as much as, as much as we wanted it to. So we were really happy with the
Right.
outcome on
So you used humor to kind of demystify a very serious topic. So Dylan, what's another example of how humor is used aside from like, haha, I'll go buy that?
Yeah, so we had a really long-standing client relationship with Rovitus Realty, and we collaborated frequently with Seven Roads Media to produce a show called the W Mass Biz Show, which has no relation to the Western Mass Business Show that we're on here today.
I think
And
it's a
we,
distant fifth cousin, but
yeah, somewhere along the
Yeah.
lineage, perhaps, right?
Yeah.
We threw a hashtag in there, whatever. So the idea was to spotlight local businesses and have an interview style format, but to make it lighthearted and fun. And it was very quick and to the point. They were like 3-minute episodes each. And we often used humor as the introduction to these episodes because we knew we needed to hook a consumer in. So in one episode, we had Steve posing like George Costanza in his underwear on a couch, like rip off of a beginning of a very famous Seinfeld episode, right? Another one, we had him in a spray tanning booth. One of them, we had him getting waxed. And actually in the beginning of the episode, we were able to utilize a clip, again, shout out to Seven Roads Media, utilize a clip from the 40-Year-Old Virgin where Steve Carell gets waxed and the Kelly Clarkson scene. So we were able to incorporate that into the intro to our show, right? So if you're scrolling through your Facebook news feed and then you see this man laying on a waxing table and the woman is applying the hot
And
waxing.
he did it, right? He really did it.
Oh yeah, we waxed them on camera. And the best part about that is that, we, Cloud9 Marketing Group, co-produced every episode of that show. And we always knew what we were going to get him into, but we never told him ahead of time. So he would show up the day of the shoot and he would have no idea that he was about to get a spray tan, or he was going to have to get photographed in his boxers, or we were going to wax him. So we had a lot of fun with that.
I just happened to see that one recently. I guess you sent some links of ideas, and when they ripped the tape off, and I was saying, oh my God, I can't believe they're relying on this old joke where he's going to be quiet for a minute and then scream. And how boring, how dull. And then instead he just smiled and, like no pain at all. And I thought like, okay, that's clever. Like I gave extra credit. Not that I'm getting my chest hair removed.
I know. I'm actually really shocked he didn't scream. I was waiting for that. He was literally just like, just
yeah.
away.
He was once he found out he was getting waxed, I think he immediately went into like the dark place and started mentally preparing himself for what was about to happen. And he knew that we only had one take. And that's the thing, is we can always, we have this running joke, the film is free, the time isn't, right? So if you mess up, we'll just take it from the top. But when you're waxing somebody's chest, you're going to know that it's take 2 because there's going to be a giant patch of hair missing from somebody. So he knew he had to nail it on the first one.
So, when I first moved to Western Mass, I think I just had like Netflix and Hulu, and I didn't have any local commercials. And then when I'd go into a store and I'd see local commercials, I was fascinated by them. And, a lot of them were kind of low budget and hokey, and they were amusing, not meant to be amusing to me because of how low budget they were. Neither of your firms made any of them. But like, what is the different expectation of seeing a local commercial of like, that's the car dealer down the street versus this is some, global brand?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to locally do a better job of not making our commercials look so local. I hate to say that because I know budgets are tight, and I give a lot of credit to the local stations who are willing to step forward and take on that burden of producing the spot for clients. But I think, there is an expectation, and there's an expectation that something looks locally produced and something looks like it was produced by Seven Roads Media. And, it was actually produced by a production company that has the high-end cameras and the high def and all of that. And so I think people tend to, like you said, Ira, sometimes we see these commercials being funny and amusing when they're not intended to be. And it's because we're sort of cringing at the quality. And so I think people have a higher level of expectation for the national and global brands, expecting their commercials to be really buttoned up and clean and have that high quality. And then when we see local, so that's why I think if you can be a local company and you can find a way to produce something professionally, you're going to blow it out of the water because people aren't expecting that. And so whenever you can find a budget to hire a production company, I always recommend doing it because I think it's going to impress people. Even if the message isn't great, just the quality is, because they're going to be like, oh, that's local car dealership right down the street who just did this. It's fantastic quality.
It's all about the trust too, I think, between the agency and the client, right? So you have to, I learned early in my career, you have to set the expectation right away. And you're never going to see 100% eye to eye with a client, but what you can do is say, listen, at the end of the day, we're going to do whatever you want because you're hiring us to do it. But you brought us in as the expert because you wanted us to tell you how this should be executed. So your idea might not play as well as you think. I suggest that we take this route. And a lot of times the client is receptive to that. But I think that's how you can sort of insulate yourself from making one of those local commercials that looks like a local commercial, is to have that conversation right away of, hey, this is probably not the angle you want to take, and doing it with the lowest cost possible, and not actually doing it in a studio setup or what have you. Just kind of setting those boundaries in the beginning can help prevent you from making a local commercial that looks like a local commercial.
Mhm. Okay. So whenever I watch comedy, I just always picture the comedy writing room and how they came up with the lines. And, even Gary Shandling's show I used to like, or 30 Rock, both of them had in their show writers' rooms as part of the story. What is a writer's room like? You meet a business owner, you think of what message you can portray, how it can be spun, humorously. Like, what is the process to create something that's going to be amusing?
Yeah, so for us, I love brainstorming sessions. That's always how I start with every client when they have something specific that they're trying to promote, or a call to action, or a campaign that they're trying to launch. The first thing we do is we do like a mind dump or a brain dump session where everybody gets into a room and every idea gets verbalized, even if it's stupid, even if the minute it leaves your mouth, you wish you could swallow it back in. And we put it on a file, and then we start to slowly narrow it down to what's resonating, what's making the most sense. Then from there, we usually put it out to a couple people who are independent. We don't necessarily, sometimes we don't share who the client is. Sometimes we do, but we do like little mini focus groups. Hey, does this make sense to you? Does this concept sound like it would resonate with you? And then we move towards storyboarding and scripting. And that's usually myself, like, going inward mentally and just kind of sitting there in front of a computer for an hour and laying out what I think I heard everybody say, what my ideas are, kind of merging everything together. And then of course it goes through so many renditions. When we just did the Square One PSA where it's adults talking, but kids doing the voiceover, and they're kind of blending the two images, that probably went through 4 or 5 versions of a script before we finalized it. So it's a long process.
That was a great commercial.
Thank you. I'm really proud of it. It was it also was really fun to just be around little kids and cool adults filming it. But that's one of the things, not to get super off topic, but when a client comes to us and says, oh, I have something I want to launch in 3 weeks. It's kind of like, can we get 3 months? Because you need time for that creative process. And I don't think people understand, if you're going to get something right, it's not overnight. You might have a great idea, but then actually having to put it together, put it onto paper, implement it, execute it, get people involved who have to film it or be a part of it. It's a laborious process. And I think people need to remember that the creative space needs time for it to really come out well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great.
Yeah, when we're going through that process, it's very collaborative. So it's a similar situation where we start with a brainstorming session, right? So we're there with the client. Maybe they might have some of their upper level management, or perhaps it's just the owner. It depends on the situation. And then we'll be there. Sometimes the video production company will be part of this process. Sometimes it'll just be me. So we'll craft the general idea. What's the theme going to be? And then try to come up with bullet points of, okay, here's the things that we want to touch on. Then usually I go back and I finesse that out into the actual script. So I'll be writing out the verbatim script that we're going to use. And then also trying to pair it up with a shot list or a storyboard, what have you. So then that gets delivered back to the client for approvals, any edits that need to be made. And then usually at that point is when we bring in the video production company, and then they put their input into the mix on how, oh, maybe this shot would be good, or maybe we could change this or flip this around, do it in a different order, whatever. And then once that gets client approval and we set, it's a very long process sometimes, right? Because you need to get a lot of schedules coordinated together, and a lot of people need to be in the same place at the same time, especially if you have outside talent that you're bringing in. So that can get difficult to juggle that. Then you need to actually film it. So that's usually either half day or full day, depending on the length of the spot. And there's a lot of takes and there's a lot of footage, which means there's a lot of editing. So then that could take weeks depending. And then that's just to deliver the first draft. So then the client needs to watch that and they say, okay, not loving this. Can we change this? Can we tweak that? Can you cut that scene? Do you have any footage to replace it? Then you go through that whole process again, right? So 3 months sounds a lot better than 3 weeks. Megan, I agree. But you work with what you have also at the end of the day, but it's also about setting that expectation. Like I said before, you got to let the client know, hey, can we get this done in less than a month? Probably. Is it going to be perfect? No. So, that's just make sure going into it that we would really like more time to be able to pull this off, because here's what the process looks like.
Okay. So I just want to branch out a little bit. That was a good education about humor in advertising. I just want to spend the rest of the time talking about a couple of other things, including I've been noticing commercials that seem like they're new. I haven't seen them a million times before. Well, certainly the obvious ones are people that are wearing masks and keeping social distance, and they're not selling masks. They're just living their life and selling some product or service, but they clearly are in COVID. And then I've seen others that just are like normal times of people, partying together. And I'm just wondering, what is your thinking on, if you need 3 months, you don't know where the world's going to be at in 3 months,
Right.
Of just reflecting that we live in a very odd time right now. How do you get your message across in that context?
Yeah, so it's funny, Ira, that you bring this up, because I have been watching too and just seeing commercials. And I actually said to my husband the other night, this is so weird because no one's wearing a mask. Like I don't know if it was a commercial or a TV show, and she was grocery shopping or something and not wearing a mask. And it was like I had this like panicked reaction, like, oh my God, she needs to put her mask on. So I go back and forth with this, right? So this is such a hard question to answer, because yeah, sure, I would love for every company to be able to take their, update all their stock images to reflect people wearing masks, and to change any digital content that they have out to someone wearing a mask. We just did a photo shoot as a company a couple of months ago over the summer, and we took some masked photos and some non, because we were also in an outdoor space, like we were outside. And we had been together. These were people that we were around on a regular basis. So we did a little bit of both, but we haven't done a lot of mask imagery in our advertising, just because I don't know. We don't know where this is going to go. I don't know if it's relevant to what we do. We're a marketing firm. We're all remote. We all work from home. And we're not holding any events right now because we can't. So like the thought of putting masks on my staff for our stock images on Instagram is kind of like, do I really need to do that? They're not wearing a mask when they're at home working on client work. So I think that it depends on the type of company that you are and what service or product you provide. And if you feel like your marketing needs to be reflective of what's happening right now, then yeah, you probably need to update some of your stock images to have that. But I don't think it's applicable to all industries.
Right. I'm just thinking, when they show a car on a racetrack, and then it says in fine print on the bottom, don't try this at home. These are professional drivers. You could have at the bottom, these people are really wearing masks in their real life. And
well, we had to do that for the Square One PSA. We filmed it in February, and then we held it and didn't launch it because of the pandemic. And then we finally decided to launch it in September, and we had to put a little disclaimer at the bottom that said this was filmed prior to COVID, because we knew that if we went out with a PSA that had children and adults in close proximity in classrooms, touching one another, people were going to lose their mind. What do
Right.
you know, what is going on? There's no masks on these kids. And so we put a little line right at the bottom that said this was filmed prior to COVID.
Right.
And it was not everybody's favorite thing to do, but we had to do it to cover our bases.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I have another question. So I'm pointing this at Dylan and Meghan. Is when I first started meeting people that had agencies around Western Mass, they were talking about how frustrating it was, and also software companies, that people from Boston or New York didn't want to hire a Western Mass company. And even one was said, I will give you this large account if you move your company to Boston. Now I found that some people are, I guess many people are getting work that is far away from Western Mass. I'm just wondering how that's working for you both.
Well, the beautiful thing about the internet, right, is that there are no walls. So, Cloud9 Marketing Group has clients that we've worked with in California and Arizona and New York and Florida, and we've even done international work. We've done consulting in Singapore and in Australia, and so the internet and social media is a beautiful thing. I think there's the big thing that if you're a service-based business, that you don't necessarily need to have four walls or brick and mortar. One thing you should really be taking advantage of in this time is Facebook groups that perhaps are industry related. I know just yesterday, I was tagged in a forum, in Agawam Town Forum, 4 or 5 times for somebody who was requesting some social media management work. So granted, that's a local forum, but there are plenty of Facebook groups that are industry related that scale the globe. So you have an opportunity now more than ever. I think we live in such a great time because you can teach yourself anything using the internet, and you can meet virtually anybody that you want using the internet. I was able to leverage Twitter to get a 15-minute meeting with Gary Vaynerchuk, who I think is by far the most talented marketer on the planet. He's a little brash talking about humor and how you present yourself and your personal branding. They take it to the next level for sure. But the internet knows no bounds. So that's the best thing about the time that we're in right now.
So just twisting that question a little bit for you, Meghan, is do people feel like, oh, this company's in Western Mass, so they're not going to be as sophisticated in some way as if they were in Paris or New York?
I think that, so my team, admittedly, I have a team member in Boston, I have a team member in New York City, and we as a company, similar to Dylan, we work with Miami and Cape Cod and New York City and California. So we're all over the place, and we're seeing a lot of growth outside of the Western Mass region. And I have not experienced, I've experienced in one circumstance where I was up against a Boston firm that they decided to go, the organization decided to go with the Boston company because it was a merger. So they were located in Western Mass and they wanted to go with us, but the company they were acquiring was located in Boston and wanted to go with the Boston firm. So they went with the Boston firm as kind of like an olive branch, to say, okay, we're going to play nice in the sandbox as we bring our two companies together. What we do is so niche and targeted. So our whole shtick is that we focus on female entrepreneurs. And when we have that as our primary mission, I don't think people care where we are. We work with a client, we've been working with a client for months, if not a year now, down in Miami. And she has a ton of Miami agencies at her disposal, but she chose to work with us because we have such a heavy emphasis on helping female entrepreneurs. So I think as long as you have something that sets you apart, something that makes you different, something that speaks to your skill set, I think, and we're, frankly, we can be more cost effective. We can be more affordable because we don't have brick and mortar. My team is everywhere, so I'm not paying for office space. And I am able to reflect that in our proposals. Now, we're not cheap, but we're also not Boston prices because I'm not renting something on Newbury Street and spending thousands of dollars a month, doing that. So I think we go back and forth. I think we lose some business to bigger agencies who have that city vibe. But I think the type of target that we work with, small to medium-sized business owners, they want to work with boutique firms, and that's who we are.
Okay, very good. So I have time for each of you to respond in about a minute to this. Is if somebody's hearing this and they're impressed, of course they're impressed by both of you, but if they're impressed by one or the other of you, what does the first encounter look like? What do you suggest they do to meet you and find out more? How about Dylan go first?
Yeah, the first thing that we would do, especially given the time that we're in now, is an introductory call. So it's just a discovery call. It could be as brief as 10 minutes if need be. I just need to get a really good understanding of what it is that you're looking to accomplish, and I'll know right off the bat if I can help provide that for you. So that's usually how the process goes. If that call goes well, I will put together a proposal that I will submit, and then we will schedule a follow-up meeting to review that together.
So do you want to give your website or phone number?
Sure. You can reach Cloud9 Marketing Group at c9mg.com, the number 9. And we are available at 413-374-3099.
Great. And if you're out of 413, you can still dial 413. Okay. And
That's true.
Megan. Yeah.
So our process is pretty much identical to Dylan's. The only thing I would add to it is I love telling people to follow us on social media, checking out our Instagram, subscribing to our e-news, checking out our blog, because they start to get a feel for the community we provide when you become a client, which is this strong women entrepreneurship networking group. So we do the same thing. I send them usually a link to our website, a link to all of our social. If they're still interested, we hop on a call, and then it moves on from there with a proposal and next steps. So our website is chickmedia.us, and that's CHIK media.us, no C in between. And you can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Chick Media as well, CHIK Media.
That's great. And so if you are far away and listening to the show, these are both two established, legitimate, and funny people too. So this is the Western Mass Business Show. I thank you to Megan and to Dylan. We are on every Saturday at 11, and we're going to start having a second showing. If you own a company in Western Mass and want to talk about something, we are now interviewing 2 or 3 people at a time on some theme, like today, humor and advertising. And so you can give me a call if you want to tell your story at 413-575-5850. And also, if you go online at whmp.com to podcast, you can play hundreds of past interviews. So thank you so much. Been great being with you.